we are told that in Sodom not 10 persons were found who could bear to break the bonds of urbanity and flee for life to the open country at dawn. Indeed, even Lot himself compromised and went to Zoar, obviously a suburban location. So it is with misgivings that we seek to direct attention to certain unobtrusive activities going forward at sunrise. To be precise, at 5 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. At least, we shall have with us the baker, the milkman, and certain others. In higher circles, perhaps the recording angel, counting the sparrows as they flutter from the cedar tree. As for these two men here, they have been agog at this time or earlier, 7 days in the week, 52 weeks in the year, all their lives since early childhood. As you have perhaps surmised, these men are farmers. Tomorrow or next day, a half pint of this milk they are handling will be taken from a refrigerator in an apartment house in the largest city in the world, and baby Mary or Peggy or Martha Jane or whatever her name may be will rejoice accordingly. The man who produced this milk is one of 6 million farm operators in this country of ours. These men support directly 30 million persons. They supply food for nearly 100 million more. They supply in the raw raiment for everybody. Each year in due season they plow the soil and plant or sow the seed. And in the long run, the balance of national prosperity turns on the result. If we know how farm products are moving, we can guess the rest. For year in and year out, the index of industry goes up and down with that of agriculture. Thus, we all stand to win or lose according to whether times are good or bad for the American farmer here or there. For the wheat farmer in Oklahoma or Kansas. For that other wheat farmer in the East who harvests his crop from Hagerstown loam. For the lonesome sheep herder of the high summer pastures of the national forest. The Iowa farmer with the perambulating hay baler. The dairyman of New York or Pennsylvania, the cotton farmer of the Delta or of the coastal plain, the cattleman of the high range country, the Ohio or Michigan farmer who still uses the old-time blade for cutting corn. According to whether fortune smiles on these folks and the millions of others of their kind, fortune smiles on you and me. Perhaps you may not think that the welfare of these remote and widely scattered individuals is any concern of yours, but rest assured it is very definitely your concern if you still eat and wear clothes and hope for a paycheck on Saturday. Your daily bread, for instance, your breakfast toast or wheat cakes, those tender hot rolls you had for dinner, surely the grain that made them was wrung from the soil in the sweat of some farmer's brow. Maybe it grew on Ute Hollow, South 40. Or maybe it grew on Dave Hunter's place. Anyway, it's clear that somebody's bread comes from Dave Hunter's place. And look, at a given hour, the hopper of Bill Scott's combine carries the wheat that in due time will make the loaf that will serve to appease the hunger of a boy who lives 1,000 miles from Bill Scott's Oklahoma ranch. Surely, in the matter of daily bread, the farmer is the almoner of the Lord of harvests. As for the sweat of his brow, don't think for a moment that the farmer begrudges us that. For odd as it may seem to some folks, the farmer, born to the soil, would just as soon work as not. A 30-hour week? Barely time enough for morning and evening chores. And so we get our spinach. And our spuds. Out in the foothills of the Rockies, the boys round up the herd and cut out the strays. For them, it's all in the day's work. To you and me, it means the savory luxury of a Western T-bone steak. And then there's the Corn Belt farmer who sometimes worries about the price of hogs. Sometimes he gets mad and vows he'll trade his sows for hens. But you will notice that the hams still turn on the barbecue spit that their savory smell goes up daily throughout our land, that there is no interruption of service at the roadside counter, and that the ultimate consumer continues to get his nourishment, well, more or less. The soft-boiled eggs you had for breakfast may or may not have come from the little flock that Mary feeds in her Michigan dooryard, may or may not have come from John Schellenbarger's longhouse, but assuredly they come from somebody's barn or longhouse, just as do the fancy eggs that are served from the diet kitchen of this great hospital to speed the patient on the way to health, just as do all of the other billions of dozens of eggs that go to market each year in this country. Thus, in sickness or in health, all look to the farmer for food to keep body and soul together. Everybody, every guest in the big New York hotel, everybody uptown, everybody downtown, everybody out in San Francisco, everybody in Cincinnati, Ohio, everybody in the national capital, everybody, everywhere depends almost wholly on the farmer for his victuals, or his hog and hominy, or his filet mignon, as the case may be. For the moment, the tallest building in the world is the Empire State, a marvel of modern engineering. But the Empire State boasts no automatic gadget that could afford its tenants as much as one hot dog if they were marooned on these man-made cliffs for a day without benefit of the soil. We all wear clothes. It's still against the law to go without them. And here's where they come from the backs of the woolies. Whether from western wool or eastern wool, our staple suitings come from the flocks of the American farmer. And so we get our top coats and our overcoats and all the other woolen garments we wear. From the cotton farm of the South, we get our shirts and most of our socks. And thence the ladies get most of their summer gowns. Thence, too, we get our sheetings, canvas for our tents and sails, fabric for our tires, and a myriad other products. 100,000 persons gathered on the monument grounds at Washington to greet Colonel Lindbergh when he returned from Paris in triumph, and they all wore clothes made from the products of American farms. There were 80,000 people at this Army Navy football game, and who, in all this crowd, didn't wear clothes of wool from some farmer's clip, and not merely for food and raiment. For employment also, millions of us depend on the farm and the farmer. On the cotton farmer, for example, depend the great cotton mills north and south, mills in which almost 500,000 persons are employed when times are good, and all who tend the machines that process the thread, all the weavers who stand at the looms, all look to the cotton farmer for the raw material on which their jobs are based, and out of which must come their pay, out of which, too, must come the dividends of the stockholders of the industry. On the wool that comes from American farms and ranches depend the woolen and worsted mills, the great mills of Passaic, of Lowell, and of Lawrence, where we see the largest worsted mill in the world. All look to the sheepman for the fleece that feeds the cards and the combs, the spinning mules and the looms, and finally justifies a payroll of over 100,000 workers. The wages of labor and the dividends of capital, as well as the commissions of jobbers and the modest share of the sheepmen, all come out of wool. The world-famous flouring mills at the Falls of St. Anthony in Minneapolis, these depend wholly on the farmer for their grist, and on the grist hangs the payroll. The even more famous Union stockyards in Chicago that feed the factories of the great American packing houses. This is the very citadel of a major industry, the wealth and payroll of which hang wholly on the labor of the American farmer. From the farm, food, raiment, employment. Now, think of wealth. Mining is a big business. Its turnover in this country runs into billions of dollars. It gives employment to over 600,000 workers. A big business. But the wealth that comes from the farm on an average year is 5 times the wealth that comes from the mine, 10 times the wealth from coal, 80 times the wealth from gold, and over 400 times the wealth from silver. Our oil business is big too. Besides thousands of operators and other officials, it gives employment to over 100,000 workmen. A big business. A business that Coal Oil Johnny might well be proud of if he could see it now. But the wealth that comes from the farm is 10 times the wealth that comes from petroleum. And consider the wealth that comes from the sea, wealth brought up by skipjacks dredging for oysters in Chesapeake Bay, by American fishermen everywhere around our coasts and on the lakes. Our fisheries yield, on the average, $100 million worth of products each year. A pretty big business. But the wealth that comes from the farm is 100 times the wealth that comes from the sea, and everybody gets a share. There remains still another product of the soil, infinitely more important than food, raiment, or any material wealth: the millions of boys and girls who come from farm homes to enrich the life stream of the nation. This contribution to the body politic is priceless. Competent authorities agree that without it, the great cities with their falling birth rate would be doomed. From the viewpoint of Times Square, such a doctrine may seem absurd, but Times Square naturally cannot see the whole picture. No one will believe his own eyes if, for example, he sees the Empire State Building thus issuing from a 12-foot smokestack. We all make allowance for optical perspective and illusion, but few indeed make any allowance at all for economic perspective. From the viewpoint of Times Square, the problems that are vital on the Jones place are distorted by the aberration of ignorance and prejudice, and Farmer Jones doubtless misjudges the problems of the big city. For few of us can see the other fellow's case as it really is. But mark this: Farmer Jones can worry along somehow without the city, but the city cannot survive as a center of commerce and finance without Farmer Jones. For a civilization to be permanent must be based primarily on agriculture or some other culture in which the family is an economic unit. These words, quoted from Dr. O.E. Baker of the Bureau of Agricultural Economics, have the weight of all history behind them. What other such culture is there? Who meets this specification if not the farmer? Who but these folks who feed and clothe mankind? Surely no one can doubt that the farm family is an economic unit. Witness the smooth teamwork at harvest time, at threshing time, at any time from dawn to dark, at any season of the year. As for the bearing of these activities on civilization, surely no one who knows his way about in the corridors of time can doubt for a moment that the farm family is the basis of our society, the hope of any future that may be in store for us. They work in close partnership with our Mother Earth, these farmers, a fundamental sort of business, old but never old-fashioned. A business in which everyone is vitally concerned. But to our dairy farmer and his son, all this is an old story, to them and to all their fellow husbandmen the country over. They plow in due season and work down the soil. They sow the seed and hope for rain. And if their skill in husbandry is nullified by nature, by insect pests, by drought, or perhaps by a single torrential rain that floods their lands and ruins their crops, well, that mischance was to have been feared, for it has happened before and will surely happen again. Or if they harvest abundantly and cannot sell the crop for the cost of growing it, well, that too has happened. Doubtless something can and will be done about that. But the uncertainty of the weather must always be a factor in the farmer's record. And so, at best, farming remains a business with certain natural hazards, say nothing of the economic hazards inherent in a haphazard world economy. Nevertheless, the farmer goes on with his work early and late, day in and day out, and lives in hope. After all, the roof of the home place still sheds water, more or less. And the supper that waits the men folks when the day's work is over and the chores have all been done, its savor enhanced by a zest such as a man may acquire from a day on the tractor or at the tail of the hay loader. That, ladies and gentlemen, is something to brag about, something to give us pause, something to take to heart for serious meditation, something indeed that might well rouse the envy of kings. Just look at those peas in cream. Not a bad business, farming, when all is told and the tally's scored. Not so bad. Not so bad. As for tomorrow, well, there's always work to be done, and we may rest well assured that the work will be done, for our farmer is the salt of the earth, and he takes pride in his job.